I would like to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs who have come to join us. I would like to thank him for his time and effort. We are very grateful, and we are very glad that he will be staying throughout the first panel. We are at Charles University, the Patriotic Hall, and so our host is the Rector of the university, Mr. Tomáš Zima, to whom I hand over for an introductory remark. Your Excellency, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad that we meet again a year later in the Patriotic Hall of the Carolinum to celebrate a rather recent tradition of Red Wednesday, when we commemorate the oppression of people of different religions throughout the world. We are in the Carolinum. It's the third oldest university building in the world. It has served education and exchanging opinions since 1386-87 on a continuous basis, even in difficult times that Prague and our country has suffered in history. It's very sad that in early 21st century there are still countries where people cannot freely express their religious beliefs. And it's even sadder that even in Europe we encounter tragic events when people are, for instance, brutally assassinated on a religious basis. There will be an ecumenical meeting in the Great Hall here later on in order to demonstrate that the freedom to believe is one of the fundamental freedoms. And we have to remain optimists. And we hope that in more and more countries people will be enabled to express their faith freely. I would like to thank the organizers for celebrating the event despite the difficult times. I'm very glad that Charles University participates in this noble event. And let us wish for all people in the world that they may freely express their faith. Thank you. Thank you. That was the Rector, the Chancellor of Charles University. You can applaud in front of your screens at home if you are following us. And now we will be handing over to the General Secretary of the Czech Bishops' Conference, Mr. Stanislav Přibyl. Your Excellency, friends, I would like to greet you on my behalf and on behalf of the Czech Bishops' Conference, especially the Archbishop Jan Graubner, the president of the conference. Apostle Paul says in his epistles, if one part of the body suffers, the entire body suffers with it. And so for us to focus on persecution of Christians and other people is an honorable obligation, because it's not a detached thing for us. We feel it close to our heart, and we suffer together. We would like to remember times and commemorate times when it was risky to express faith in this country. You would risk position in society, your health, and sometimes even your life. I'm very glad that together with the Institute for Christian Democratic Policy and my dear friends in the Ecumenical Council of Churches and the Federation of Jewish Communities of the Czech Republic, we can put this event together. Even for those that are far from us now, it's an afternoon dedicated to thought, to learning new things. It's an afternoon when we will pray for those who are persecuted, and we will manifest and demonstrate that we are not indifferent. I would like to wish all of you that are here and in front of the screens that you enjoy the event and you find a lot of food for thought for your future life. That was Stanislav Přibyl. May I ask for a round of applause? Another co-organizer is the Ecumenical Council of Churches, represented by the General Secretary Petr Ján Vinš, a re-elected secretary.
Your Excellency, colleagues, dear viewers at home, in front of your computer or television screens, Red Wednesday is the third Red Wednesday this year, and right from the start, in the Czech Republic, it has been co-organized by the Czech Bishops' Conference, the Ecumenical Council of Churches, and the Federation of Jewish Communities. And I think it is very important that this event is being co-organized and supported by almost all the major Christian and Jewish organizations. This shows that the topic of religious freedom is not about individual religions or churches. It is something that all of us need to support. The freedom of religion is not something we should be taking for granted. We experienced a lack of this kind of freedom under communism, and many people continue to experience it all over the world in non-democratic regimes where the religion is often considered one of the enemies of the regime because it brings with it a set of values which are not in line with tyrannies or undemocratic regimes. Or it can be in situations where a single religion or a fundamentalist interpretation of a single religion oppresses all the others. These are situations that unfortunately are taking place all around the world. Approximately 60% of the world's population live in countries where they cannot freely profess their religion. In the Czech Republic, we are free to express our religious beliefs, and it is all the more important, therefore, for us to support those who do not have this freedom and who need our help, who need us to make it clear and emphasize the fact that the freedom of religion is not just a bonus, it is something that is essential for the life of every single person and needs to be defended. Thank you to everybody, to all those who have participated in this event. Thank you to all those of you who are joining Red Wednesdays in more than 70 places, locations all around the country today, and are commemorating the importance of this topic. By way of conclusion, let me say that Red Wednesday is one day, a single day in a year, but we should be defending and commemorating the freedom of religion every single day of the year, 365 days a year. The freedom of religion should be and become an integral part of our lives all over the world. That was Petr Ján Vinš. Thank you. And on behalf of the Federation of Jewish Communities, its secretary, Tomáš Kraus, you have the floor. Your Excellency, colleagues, and especially our dear viewers, those of you who are sitting in front of your TV screens, your mobile phones, your computer screens. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Red Wednesdays started out as an event that was supposed to put focus on the persecution many people are facing all over the world, Christians are facing all over the world. And it's not only Christians, even though Christians, of course, are a very important part of that community. Looking all around the world, we see that there are far too many groups that still face persecution. Father Niemeyer famously said that when they came to get him, there was no one left to defend him. And so we are here today to defend and stand up for those who might not be visible to the general public. So we want to say it very clearly that the freedom of religion is not something to be taken for granted. We live with the luxury of being able to express our religious beliefs, to enjoy all the freedoms here in the Czech Republic. But that is a luxury that is different from the situation in many parts of the world. Even anti-Semitism is not really at dangerous levels in the Czech Republic, unlike in other parts of the world. So 3 years ago, we joined this initiative, Red Wednesdays, and as previous speakers have mentioned, we will make sure to commemorate this topic throughout the year, because whoever hurts us is planning to hurt the others as well. Thank you to Tomáš Kraus from the Federation of Jewish Communities. Let me remind you of the fact that you are now watching a conference on the persecution for faith in the Third World. And we are commemorating an event called Red Wednesdays. It's red because red is the color of blood of those who die for their faith. And the first panel will be devoted to the Czech perspective, i.e. how we Czechs see the current situation in the world. We have been through times of oppression, as several speakers have mentioned. Several decades, several generations lived under religious oppression. Those of us who still remember, and some of us who still remember, are here today talking to you. So we do have this historical experience which we want to share with the younger generation. The first speaker will be Pavel Svoboda. Pavel Svoboda is the main face of the Red Wednesdays event in the Czech Republic. As I said, this initiative started in the UK, but was adopted very quickly by the Czech Republic. I believe we were the 3rd or 5th country in the world to join in. Pavel Svoboda is a person to whom the question of religious freedom is very dear. He used to be the Prime Minister of the Czech government. He was also a member of the European Parliament. He was a very influential MEP because he was the chair of the Jury Committee in the European Parliament, and he has always been very active when it comes to the freedom of religion. Pavel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the floor. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, recently I was called by a young lady from an important human rights organization asking me whether I was aware of any kind of violation of human rights in the world that would be worth of attention. She probably expected me to give a negative answer. However, and unfortunately, I gave her a positive answer, and I started talking about widespread persecution on religious grounds and on freedom of religion. The young lady was quite surprised because our debate did not follow the course that she had expected. But apparently also because she had never heard about the lack of religious freedom in the world. And considering that she represents an important human rights organization, that is definitely some food for thought. So this makes me think what an upheaval this would cause among the political elites in Europe if it turned up that homophobia kills around 100,000 people in the world every year. Over 200 million suffer not only intolerance, but, strictly speaking, persecution, including violence, incarceration, and even killings. They are deprived of their rights. I can see political leaders standing on barricades, uttering strong words and waving colorful flags, because such statistics does not deserve another reaction. How can we explain, however, that if the same statistics goes for another human right, the freedom of religion, nothing actually happens. Nobody waves flags and situation in the world keeps worsening. So is it really true what is said about human rights, that they are universal and indivisible? If you look at religious freedom, it seems they are divisible and they are not at all universal. And you can easily use double standard here. I suppose that one of the next speakers, Ján Figeľ, will explain that it's the other way around. And violating religious freedom tends to be a signal that other human rights are not in a rosy situation either. And it should be Europe, the cradle of an institutionalized system of human rights, that should be in the first line of fight against the violation of any of such rights. And I'll be politically incorrect here. It's illogical, nonsensical, counterproductive and hypocritical from us Europeans to export to the world the so-called right to reproductive health of women and at the same time overlook mass violence perpetrated on religious grounds. It seems we should tidy up in Europe, in the Czech Republic, in our regions, in our communities, families, and in our minds. It's Red Wednesday today, ladies and gentlemen, and we are gathering to remind us that the 100,000 people that are killed every year on religious grounds, the 200 million people who are persecuted on religious grounds, that's not just statistical data, it's reality of today. It's the largest ongoing genocide on this planet. I'm glad that even though the Western civilization tends to stick its head into the sand, we do not remain silent. Because of those that will die today, because of their faith, they'll be tortured or suffer in prisons. We lit up buildings in red, the color of blood that has been and will be shed today because of the importance of religion to many people. I am glad that we are illuminating those buildings. I would like to thank all of those who participated. We'll be lighting up the building of the Chamber of Deputies of the Czech Parliament, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Rudolfinum, the concert hall, Petříček watching tower, many churches, places of worships, synagogues and other places. Even people at home will put red candles in their windows. Many people are not indifferent. We all obviously ask ourselves the question, do we do enough? Allow me one parallel. I would like to quote the words of a rather unorthodox American Franciscan, Richard Rohr, who said, in the history of the church, many people were burned because of the wrong manner of religion. It's interesting that no one was burned for not standing up for their neighbors. Let us ask this question with Richard Rohr. Do we Europeans have a right to speak about fundamental human rights and pretend to be the main protector of these rights, and at the same time remain silent in case there are massive and violent violations of one of these rights? It's no hyperbole to say that religious freedom is a fundamental one. Otherwise, so many people would not rather suffer and die than renounce their faith. We have to speak about the human rights dimension of this tragedy with the European majority population that believes that if they themselves do not believe in God, they cannot be bothered for religious freedom. But that's an error. Even these people have their belief. The secular belief, they believe there is no God, and they would not want anyone to push their opinion to them. And we have a lot of experience with that in this part of the world. And this is why even them should care for this human right and to look after it is not violated anywhere in the world. I am very glad, therefore, that we are holding this conference for a fourth time, again in cooperation of the Czech Bishops' Conference, Ecumenical Council of Churches, Federation of Jewish Communities, and Institute for Christian Democratic Policy, again on the premises of Charles University. Thank you to the university for that, and for the first time in collaboration with Noe Television. It's our expression of solidarity with the people that suffer for their beliefs. It's also our contribution to preventing indivisible and universal human rights that are considered one of the pillars of Western civilization from turning into pieces. I would like to wish every success to the conference, and I hope it will become a little piece in the mosaic of a better world. Thank you.
Thank you to Pavel Svoboda. As has been said, we Czechs often consider ourselves an atheist nation, an atheist state. However, it is interesting that in many parts of the world, it is also atheists who are cruelly prosecuted. So atheists too should care for the freedom of religion, which is also the freedom not to be of any religious affiliation. As has been said, we should basically be observing Red Wednesdays every single day of the year, because the freedom of religion is a topic which is extremely important to every single one of us. All of us are responsible for the fate of every other human being. Everything is closely interlinked. However, what is especially interesting is politicians who represent the voices of entire nations, which is why we are so happy that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic has accepted our invitation to this conference. As Mr. Svoboda has said, the building of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will also be illuminated with red light tonight. The floor is yours, Minister. Dear Rector, dear representatives of the Czech Bishops' Conference, Ecumenical Council of Churches, of the Federation of Jewish Communities, dear Mr. Svoboda, dear Mr. Figeľ, who I believe is with us online, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of this conference, I would like to first of all thank all the organizers for being able to organize this conference despite the very difficult circumstances of this pandemic. Very often we receive consolation from that's what faith gives us. And we need space to practice our religions and our beliefs. And the pandemic shows us that in many states, there is still a lot of oppression on religious grounds. Religious freedom, to me, is a fundamental human right for every single human being. It is the path to tolerance for all of us. And violating religious freedom is not only violating just another human right, as Mr. Svoboda has said. To me, it is also an indicator of potential instability, violence, and potential conflicts, which may, in the end, lead to very serious crimes against humanity or genocide. Which is why I am so concerned while watching and seeing the rights of many religious minorities in countries such as China, Myanmar, many countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere being violated. In our country, we do have the experience with the communist dictatorship and then the return to the respect for human rights. Therefore, we have a special share of the responsibility to support and protect human rights and the freedom of religion in countries where it is being denied. The freedom of religion is a basis of human dignity. The Czech Republic supports the principle of equality and indiscrimination, which means that nobody's rights may be curtailed due to their sex, their religion, or ethnicity. The Czech diplomacy has been a long-term supporter of religious freedom through our membership in many international organizations, such as the United Nations, where we are actively assisting the UN in combating human rights violations, including religious freedom. The Czech Republic is also one of the founding members of the International Alliance for Religious Freedom. We are one of the more than 40 states that are willing to cooperate while supporting and protecting this freedom. We always make sure that a reference to freedom of religion is added to important international treaties and texts, and we also provide aid, specific concrete aid in many countries of the world, such as, for example, the cooperation with the churches in Cuba. We also cooperate with projects supporting interreligious dialogue in Myanmar. There are projects that we support in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And recently there was a conference in the Czech Republic on the intercultural and religious dialogue, where we also had participants from Arab countries. We have also been long-term supporters of communication with representatives of African countries. As I have said, persecution for religion, persecution for faith, tends to be an indicator of greater, deeper grained conflict, which is why we also provide humanitarian aid and cooperation in many countries, in many parts of the world hit by, for example, natural disasters. At the end of last year, we have nominated a special envoy for the topic of Holocaust and religious freedom. Yes, the building of the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs will be illuminated with red light as a symbol of the support the Ministry of Foreign Affairs provides to Red Wednesdays, and as a symbol of the fact that we need to continue to work on and protect the freedom of religion worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, these are difficult times, which is why it is so important to solve issues together, cooperate with churches, with human rights organizations. And I appreciate the fact that Christians, Jews and Muslims, not only in our country, but all over the world, are joining forces to fight against the pandemic and to support the message of tolerance. They are fighting against any expressions of intolerance. And in this context, it is very important at the international level, Pope Francis's and the head imams Al-Tayyib's document on partnership, which speaks against conflicts and about against blind extremism. Religiously motivated hatred has caused many tragedies in our history, and we need to believe in the power of love and tolerance, as our religious leaders often appeal to us to do. They can help bridge our differences and solve our problems, not through focusing on our differences and on inciting hatred against Christians, Muslims, Jews, or any other groups of believers. In these times where so many fake information, disinformations, and so much hatred is spreading, we need to focus on facts, and religious literacy is very important in this context. Personally, I'm a graduate of the Charles University, which is why I understand why it is so important to involve an educational organization like this one, because young people can help with educating others, can help us in our fight against anti-Semitism, against expressions of intolerance and hatred, also online. We need to make sure we do everything in our power to protect everybody, despite our differences. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, Mr. Tomáš Petříček. We believe things will go in the right direction. Now we'll have an experiment. We are connecting Ján Figeľ from Bratislava, Slovakia. Originally, we intended to have him here with us, but in the end, he will be connecting remotely. Hello from Prague. Ján Figeľ, similarly as our other two speakers, has a EU experience where he acted as a EU commissioner for Slovakia. He was also a special representative for religious freedom for non-EU countries. It seemed quite important to us as a position, but the position no longer exists. So he was actually the first and the last special representative for religious freedom outside the EU. We hope it does not mean that the EU is turning away from this agenda. And before handing over to Ján Figeľ, I would just like to remind you that you can submit your questions. There'll be a Q&A session after Ján Figeľ's talk. Use the Facebook of the Institute for Christian Democratic Politics or the Facebook of the Red Wednesday. So we'll be listening to Ján Figeľ from Bratislava over the next 10 minutes. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me all right in Prague. Yes, everything works all right. Many greetings to our brothers and friends in the Czechoslovak and European spirit. Thank you, Daniel, for the introduction and for the question and for the collaboration that I value very much. When you called me, when Petr Jaško was detained in Sudan and imprisoned, it was a difficult situation, and it was worth it to get involved. And it's great news that Petr Jašek is free, and several other prisoners, 9 in total, were liberated. It was quite complicated, I could say a risky situation, but we could make use of the good name of the European community, and we achieved more than I would have expected in Sudan, Pakistan, Iraq, several African countries. And this is why the European Union should do more and follow up on this introductory period, which was the result of a genocide. And I insist, it was genocide, the crime of crimes, not just an isolated event. Genocide against minorities in Syria and Iraq. It's necessary to act in time and preventively. I would like to greet Tomáš Petříček. I'm glad that the Czech Republic is there as well, and there is a special position dedicated to these issues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's great that Pavel, Svoboda and the community of likely-minded people are working together. We must never forget that we also experienced a lack of freedom. We should remember that many people, perhaps the majority of people in the world, lack freedom. And it's not only about religious freedom, it's about human dignity, because religious freedom is defined by international law as freedom of thinking, conscience, and religion. and it's the deepest expression of individual human freedom. So it's about respecting the human dignity of all people. If there is no religious freedom, there'll be a lack of other freedoms as well, as we remember from the previous regime in Czechoslovakia. All these freedoms were just an illusion, given that there was no religion freedom to start with. And I'm not referring to sports clubs or fishermen's clubs. Religious freedom is a test of all the other freedoms. It's a civilization criterion and an objective. If freedom and human dignity are respected, and they are a criterion for public policy and public affairs, there you will have a different development of civilization that is based on respecting what is now very visible, identity-based policies and politics. So the human identity as an individual and as a member of a group. My identity, as long as I respect the identity of others, must be respected too. And belief is part of my identity. People actually die for it. They are willing to die for their beliefs. And that's immensely strong. We are different. That's natural. We are diverse in identity, and we have the same, or should have the same dignity. We have to remember one thing when we are discussing this topic. Where religious freedom is respected, you will find sustainable development. And it is proven that economic growth goes in line with these freedoms. And also peace. As we suggested at the beginning, the situation overall in the world is not good. Up to 79% of human population live in countries where there are big or very big obstacles to religious freedom. And another piece of bad news is that the trends are worsening. These figures are growing. And their specific forms include intolerance or outright discrimination, persecution, and the fourth degree is genocide. And this is not theory, it's the reality of the world nowadays. There are forces that act against freedoms. Islamic terrorism in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, religious nationalism witnessed in many places in India or Burma, totalitarian ideologies such as the one in North Korea, but also China, affecting Uyghurs and other communities. But even in Europe, there are countries where secularism is perceived on an ideological basis as a replacement of plurality and pluralist society. Fair secularism is a blessing for religious freedom, but unfair, ideologically based secularism replaces religious freedom by one single modern ideology, which goes to the detriment of religious freedom and to convivence. This is often the result of the corona crisis or terrorist attacks, and laws are being adopted to enhance security, as it is said. And this is used to limit religious freedoms, even where they should not be reduced. What should we do? And what should we do as Europeans? The first thing is raising awareness why religious freedom is important. It's not something extra. It's not a hobby. it's not just some minor right. It's a fundamental human right. It's defined in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that has 30 articles in total. It's central. It's really placed in the center, in the middle of the other articles, because it is linked to all the others. It expresses individual and collective freedom, the private and public life, and has many other connections. In order to respond to this international religious crisis, we should approach it similarly as in the case of climate crisis. The trend is negative. There is an agreement that we should do something in order to prevent an even worse development. There are millions of people that are suffering and dying. Religious freedom is an issue of life and death. And this is why we should respond to it similarly as we do to the climate change. We should understand what it is all about and to act in a manner that this does not get worse, but it goes for the better. This is why we need a global movement for religious freedom. And this means linking the efforts of governments, parliaments, and civil societies. Recently, in November, there was a third event, the Summit of Ministers for Religious Freedom, organized by the Polish. Next time it will be in Brazil. It was held for the third time, and the Czech Republic has participated since February. It focuses on international affairs. In the European Union, there was the post of a special representative. I hope this will continue in future. And member states, including the Czech Republic, have approached this issue as a specific and urgent one. This is why we have a network of ambassadors and representatives for religious freedom. Deputies, members of parliament, collaborate on a global level. It's hundreds of deputies working in the Interparliamentary Platform for Religious Freedom, as Pavel Svoboda can confirm. Since 2014, we have an intergroup for religious freedom operating. There are also non-governmental organizations and the civil society that consider this a topic of importance for the entire civilization. It's great that there is such a network, and it might be the basis of what we need. As I said, we need a global movement for religious freedom at a time of global crisis. Because if we just limit ourselves to saying what the trends are and we do not do anything sensible and reasonable, it will get even worse. Any crisis, you should apply two basic tools, and that's common sense and conscience. That serves in any crisis. That is, you should apply tools and methods that are logical, functional, competent, and reasonable, and also to be human. It's not about statistical data. It's similar as the COVID crisis. Common sense, solutions based on conscience. We need the effort of all people of goodwill here. And I would like to add one more dimension. We often require a corporate social responsibility from large corporations, businesses. When we are talking with religious communities, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and others, and if we talk about religious freedoms for them so that they can live and develop, this can only be possible if they themselves also hold responsibility for freedom. So they should also contribute to the thriving of freedom. And this is religious social responsibility, as I would call it. There are many countries. I visited Bosnia as the European representative, where religious leaders have greater authority than any politician. It's a challenge for religious leaders in Bosnia and elsewhere to make use of this credibility for the benefit of their countries and nations. And this goes for any community, religious beliefs in the world. The minister mentioned tolerance not only at the level of the Pope and the main imam. It's something that should work at national levels. And I hope it's rather a rule than an exception. What we need is pluralism in society, and we need education on religion and religious realia that exist in the world. We must learn about the real things. If we do not learn about them, we won't be able to form them either. Education, including religious literacy, is key, because we need to live together in diversity, not exist together in diversity, but live. Live is much more than exist, because it comprises the element of quality and responsibility. And by way of conclusion, I would like to say that the education effort and convivence should focus on two dimensions: human dignity for everybody and everywhere, not just the majority and only some. It must be there for everywhere, because it's a source of universal human rights and equality between people, whether you are king or a homeless person. And the second objective for living together is constitutional pluralism that is not only perceived as a diversity of opinions and beliefs, but also as the obligation and responsibility and intention to get involved in the protection of freedoms of the others, because that ultimately means all of us. Thank you, and I would like to greet you again on Red Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Ján Figeľ, who has connected with us from Bratislava. And I'd like to encourage you to submit your questions or comments, to be active in our debate. Please send your questions and comments to our Facebook profile, to the Facebook profile of Red Wednesdays and the Institute for Christian Democratic Policies. And the first question is for the Foreign Minister, Mr. Petříček. The question is as follows. In which countries abroad is the freedom of religion a standard part of the diplomatic activities? In other words, which countries are our allies when it comes to promoting religious freedom globally? As I've said, there is a new, relatively new international alliance of states which want to protect and promote the freedom of religion. There are approximately 40 members from Europe. There's also the US and many other, especially democratic states from all over the world, which are aware of the fact that human rights are universal and indivisible and want to protect them. Then there are states which are the focus of our interest and attention, mainly due to the situation of human rights and freedom of religion, where the situation is not ideal. There are, unfortunately, dozens of such states globally, And the topic of the freedom of religion was recently the subject of an investigation to human rights in at least 3 cases in the Council for Human Rights at the level of the UN. The inquiries focused on Bahrain and many other countries. And these were inquiries during which the Czech Republic did mention the violation of the freedom of religion as one of the main issues to be focused on. But of course, the freedom of religion affects a number of states worldwide, and we need to focus on not only raising the issue as such, but on launching and supporting specific projects, which I have mentioned, for example, in Myanmar, where we've tried to help foster religious dialogues. Then there are projects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the main focus is on religious freedom and the inter-religious dialogue, helping these countries on their way to the EU. Thank you. There's another question for Pavel Svoboda. The current conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, is it a religious conflict? And to what extent is it a religious conflict? And who can stop Prime Minister Erdogan? That's the question. I think this is more a question to the foreign minister. Well, I have decided to spare the minister, says the moderator. Mr. Svoboda. Well, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not primarily religious. It's mainly an ethnic, interstate conflict. Azeris, the fact that Azeris are mainly Muslims and Armenians are mainly Christians is more or less an accompanying issue, apart from the ethnic issue. So it's not primarily a religious conflict in my eyes, even though there are, of course, impacts and aspects that have to do with religion. Let me ask the minister an additional question. If there is Brexit, when Brexit happens, the UK has been one of the states which have very clearly defended and promoted human rights globally, even in situations where other states were more hesitant. So what is the situation likely to be after Brexit? Well, I don't think Brexit will have a major impact on the topics that the EU will be promoting in international fora. Ján Figeľ was the first, and I'm convinced that not the last, special envoy of the EU for this topic. Based on the information available to me, his successor is currently being selected. So the EU will continue, of course, to raise the issue of religious freedom, including the Czech Republic as a member state. We will continue to raise the issue during internal negotiations, but of course, especially at the global level. We will continue to focus on violations of human rights, of the religious freedom. Of course, we are going to miss the UK. It's a major economy, an important state, but it definitely doesn't mean that the EU will no longer be willing and ready to raise these issues globally. Mr. Svoboda, I think it is important to also say that as today is Red Wednesday, I believe that this initiative was actually born in the UK. It was launched by Lord David Alton. So there definitely is this very important focus and emphasis on the freedom of religion in the UK, regardless of its membership in the EU. Right, there is another question for Mr. Figeľ in Bratislava. And I will also add my own comment to it. So, what kind of activities is the Slovak government currently focusing on? We are very close to Slovakia, of course, so are there any activities that we should be aware of? Well, it's great to hear that the Czech Republic is interested in what we are doing in Slovakia, because, of course, we also watch what is happening in the Czech Republic very closely. Well, there are repeated events, such as, for example, Red Wednesdays. Red Wednesday event is also being observed today in Slovakia. In September this year, the previous Slovak parliament adopted a very strong resolution and declaration in support of persecuted believers and Christians all over the world. And after the recent election, the new government included a very strong text on the support for freedom of religion in its manifesto. And there is also a commitment there to create at the office of the government a new office focusing on the support and promotion of religious freedom all over the world. The office has not been established yet, probably due to the global pandemic and other circumstances, but I would very much welcome it if the government could really deliver this commitment. And the Visegrad Group is also focusing on this issue. The Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary and Poland are already raising these issues at the national level as individual states, but we could definitely strengthen our cooperation within the V4 group in this respect too, all over the world. And we are, of course, part of this world. It is better to help in countries where there is conflict, where there are issues, where there are problems, than wait and only deal with the repercussions that there will definitely be for Europe. Let me touch upon another aspect, which is religious literacy. When I worked in the media, this was something that I always focused on. I always found it very important and wanted to implement it, but not always successfully. So, Minister, Mr. Petříček, in your view, how can we improve religious literacy in the Czech Republic? What tools are there that we can use? I can definitely imagine religious literacy to become part of the educational curriculum, which would lead students and pupils to active citizenship, which would help young people understand others with a view to their religious beliefs. It would help them think critically about the information that is being presented to them. And that will help them become more engaged and more interested in the role of religion in our society. So I think this is not only about us lecturing to students and people about the foundations of each of the main religions, but we should focus rather on the common set of values that we share. For example, when it comes to religion books, because there is a basic set of values that all religions share. At the same time, this needs to be linked with a general education aiming at responsible citizenship, because, of course, every believer is also an integral part of our society, a member of society, and this is part of the responsibility towards everybody else, all the other parts of the society, be it at the national Czech level or internationally. So we need to be aware of our differences, but also we need to be aware of what we share and the links to society as a whole. There is another question, and I believe it will be best answered by Pavel Svoboda. The question is as follows: what can an ordinary citizen of our country do for Uyghurs in China? We know that they are suffering from oppression. We hear about it on TV, in the news, but what can an ordinary person do? You, as someone who has had very important political positions, who has held very important political positions in the past, so what can we do?
I think that in a free world, we have quite a few possibilities. We can get involved through human rights organizations. As I said in my introductory words, I tried to indicate that we should direct the human rights organizations to the topic of religious freedom, because it's not always their priority. Any citizen can contribute by writing a letter, or a couple of citizens writing a letter to such a human rights organization, because human rights organizations have budgets. They are actually funded, and they can support adequate projects. Any citizen can get involved through writing letters to embassies of countries which are struggling, let's say, with religious freedom. And you can also look at human rights organizations that operate on an international scale. For instance, Church in Need, to name but one. We had representatives of Open Doors here at the past events. And I believe that even a small donation, for instance, to these organizations, these are all little pieces, little stones to the mosaic that an ordinary citizen can provide. There's an individual question for the minister. Croatia and Hungary have funds to support Christian students from countries with strong levels of persecution so that they can graduate, they finish their university studies. Will the Czech Republic join such an initiative? The Czech Republic does not differentiate the causes of persecution based on whether you are Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. I would like to issue a warning here. Religious freedom does not only mean religious freedom for Christians. It has been said several times here. As Christians, we also have responsibility for religious freedom of the other denominations, other religions. Christians are persecuted in many regions, and Christianity is persecuted there. That's a fact. The Czech diplomatic service approaches this in the same manner as discrimination of Muslims in predominantly or in countries where there are a minority. The Czech Republic currently is not planning a special fund, a grant fund, scholarships for Christian students. We have human rights projects to help anybody who is persecuted because of their political opinions, because of their religion, or because of their gender. And we also provide tangible support, including the possibility to study in our country. Thank you. The first session has just come to an end, And I would like to thank Minister Tomáš Petříček, Pavel, Svoboda and Ján Figeľ for being the speakers for the first panel. We will continue at 2:20. That's just 10 minutes time. So those of you who are following us either on your computer screens or by television, be assured that we will reappear in 10 minutes and we will continue with the second panel, the international perspective. Thank you for the moment, and I believe it has been very interesting for everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation.